Daniel walked into his own house and heard his mother screaming. But it wasn't a normal scream. It was muffled, desperate, coming from upstairs. He took the steps 3 at a time, his heart pounding. When he pushed open the bedroom door, he saw something that would destroy him. The woman he planned to marry in 2 months had her hands wrapped around his mother's throat. His mother's face was turning purple. Her legs were kicking weakly against the bed. And Lisa, the woman who kissed him goodbye that morning, looked calm. Too calm. He was supposed to be at work. He wasn't supposed to come home early. She didn't expect him. This is a true story about a son who walked in at the exact right moment. About a mother who tried to warn him. And about a woman who almost got away with murder. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you look twice at everyone you think you know. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me take you back to that Thursday afternoon. The day Daniel Blake's entire world came crashing down. Daniel was a successful real estate developer in Denver, Colorado. At 42 years old, he owned properties all over Cherry Creek and the Denver Tech Center. He'd worked hard to build his empire, starting with nothing but determination and his mother's prayers. That morning started like any other. He woke up beside Lisa, the woman he'd been engaged to for 3 months. She smiled at him, kissed his cheek, and told him she loved him. "I'm going to spend the day with your mom," Lisa said over breakfast. "Maybe we'll go shopping, get our nails done. Wedding planning stuff." Daniel's mother, Grace, had moved in with them 2 weeks earlier. Not because she was sick, because Daniel insisted. He'd finally convinced her to leave her small apartment in Sur-Alaire and come live in his spacious house in Ikoyi. "You've worked your whole life, Mom," he'd told her. "Let me take care of you now. Plus, Lisa and I want you here. Your family." Grace had been hesitant at first, but she'd agreed. And Lisa had seemed genuinely happy about it, or at least that's what Daniel thought. That Thursday morning, Daniel left for work around 8. He had back-to-back meetings scheduled, property inspections, a new development project that needed his attention. It was supposed to be a full day. But then, around 2 in the afternoon, something happened. Daniel was sitting in his office in the middle of a video conference when he felt it. This strange, heavy feeling in his chest. Like something was pressing down on his lungs. Like he couldn't breathe properly. He tried to ignore it. Tried to focus on the presentation his architect was giving. But the feeling got stronger. Heavier. And then he heard it. Not with his ears. In his spirit. In that deep place inside him that knew things without understanding how. "Go home. Now." Daniel stood up abruptly, cutting off his architect mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, I have to go," he said, already grabbing his car keys. His team looked at him, confused. Daniel never left meetings early. Never. "Sir, we haven't finished the..." "Reschedule it," Daniel said, his voice tight. "I have to go home. Right now." He didn't know why. He couldn't explain it. But his body was already moving, his feet carrying him toward the elevator, his hands shaking as he pressed the button. The drive from his downtown Denver office to his Cherry Creek house normally took 20 minutes. Daniel made it in 12. His heart was pounding the entire way. His palms were sweating against the steering wheel. That heavy feeling in his chest kept getting worse, kept pressing down harder, kept screaming at him to hurry. When he pulled into his driveway, everything looked normal. The gate was closed. The compound was quiet. Lisa's car was parked where it always was. Daniel killed the engine and sat there for a moment, feeling foolish. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe that feeling was nothing but anxiety. But then he heard it. A scream. Muffled. Desperate. Coming from inside his house. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He threw open the car door and ran. His keys fumbled in the lock. His hands wouldn't work properly. Finally, the door opened and he burst inside. "Mom!" he shouted. "Mom!" Another scream. Weaker this time. Coming from upstairs. Daniel ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. His chest was burning. His mind was racing. The master bedroom door was closed. He grabbed the handle and pushed. The door swung open. And what Daniel saw in that moment, what his eyes took in during that split second, would live in his nightmares forever. Lisa was on top of his mother on the bed. Her hands were wrapped tight around Grace's throat. Grace's face was dark, turning purple. Her mouth was open, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Her hands were clawing at Lisa's wrists, but weakly now, like she was running out of strength. And Lisa's face was focused. Determined. like she was concentrating on a difficult task she needed to finish. Time seemed to stop. Daniel's brain couldn't process it. Couldn't make sense of what his eyes were showing him. This was Lisa, his fiancée. The woman who laughed at his jokes. The woman who helped him pick out furniture for this house. The woman who was supposed to become his wife in 2 months. But the woman on that bed, with her hands around his mother's throat, didn't look like the woman he knew at all. Get off her. Daniel's voice exploded through the room like a bomb. Lisa's head snapped toward him. Her eyes went wide. Her hands released. Grace gasped a horrible, rattling sound, her chest heaving as air rushed back into her lungs. Daniel crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed Lisa by the shoulders and threw her backward, away from the bed, away from his mother. Lisa stumbled, hitting the wall, her eyes locked on Daniel's face. And for one impossible moment, they just stared at each other. Daniel's chest was heaving. His hands were shaking. His mind was screaming questions he couldn't even form into words. Why? 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 Grace was coughing, gasping, her hands at her throat, tears streaming down her face. Daniel turned to her, his hands finding her face, tilting it toward him. Mom, look at me. Breathe. Just breathe. I'm here. Grace's eyes found his. They were terrified, confused, grateful. Daniel, she rasped, her voice barely there. I've got you, he whispered, his own voice breaking. I've got you. You're safe now. Behind him, Lisa was breathing hard, still pressed against the wall. Daniel turned to look at her, really look at her, and asked the question that would haunt him. What did you just do? Lisa's chest was rising and falling rapidly. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled. Her designer blouse was wrinkled. But it was her eyes that stopped Daniel cold. They weren't filled with horror at what she'd almost done. They weren't filled with shame or regret or even surprise. They were filled with calculation, like she was trying to figure out her next move. Daniel, I can explain, she started, her voice shaky but controlled. Explain? Daniel's voice came out low, dangerous. You had your hands around my mother's throat. Explain that. Grace was still gasping, her hand pressed against her neck, red marks already forming where Lisa's fingers had been. Lisa's eyes darted between them. She attacked me. I was defending myself. Daniel stared at her. What? I was in here cleaning, and she went crazy, Daniel. Started yelling at me, saying horrible things, and then she came at me. I had to protect myself. Grace's eyes went wide. She tried to speak, but her voice was too damaged, too raw. She attacked you, Daniel repeated slowly. So you were choking her? I was trying to hold her back. I saw you. Daniel's voice finally broke, rising to a shout. I saw your hands around her throat. I saw her face turning purple. I saw you killing her. Lisa flinched. For just a moment, the mask slipped. Something cold and hard flashed across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by tears. Daniel, please, she said, her voice breaking. You don't understand. She's been poisoning you against me since I moved in. She doesn't want us to be together. She's been trying to break us up. Grace made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Daniel looked at his mother. At the marks on her throat. At the terror still lingering in her eyes. At the way she was looking at Lisa like she was staring at a stranger. Then he looked back at Lisa, and something clicked into place. All those little moments over the past 2 weeks. Grace going quiet when Lisa entered the room. Grace making excuses to visit her friend instead of staying home. Grace's gentle suggestion last week that maybe they should slow down the wedding plans. Daniel had brushed it all off. Thought his mother was just adjusting to the new living arrangement. Thought she was being overprotective. He hadn't realized she was afraid. Get out, Daniel said quietly. Lisa's face crumpled. What? Get out of my house. Right now. Daniel, you can't be serious. I love you. I did this because... Because what? Daniel's voice was ice. Because my mother doesn't want you here? So you decided to kill her. I wasn't. I saw you. The room fell silent. Grace was crying now, silent tears running down her face, her hand still pressed against her bruised throat. Daniel pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Lisa asked, panic creeping into her voice. Calling the police. No. Lisa lunged forward, reaching for the phone. Daniel, please don't do this. We can talk about this. Just us. We don't need to involve anyone else. Daniel stepped back, keeping the phone away from her. You tried to murder my mother. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Lisa? Tell me. Make me understand how I walked in here and found you choking her. Lisa's mouth opened. Closed. Her eyes were wild now, darting around the room like she was looking for an escape route. She was going to ruin everything, Lisa finally said, the words tumbling out. Don't you see? She was going to convince you to call off the wedding. To send me away. And I've worked too hard. She stopped. Her hand flew to her mouth like she could shove the words back in. But it was too late. Daniel stared at her. Worked too hard for what? Lisa shook her head, backing up toward the door. Answer me. Worked too hard for what? For this. Lisa's voice rose, something breaking in it. For this life. This house. This security. Do you think I spent 8 months building this relationship just to watch your mother destroy it? The room went completely still. Even Grace stopped crying, her eyes fixed on Lisa's face. Building this relationship, Daniel repeated slowly, each word feeling like broken glass in his mouth. Like it was a project. Lisa's face crumpled. She pressed her back against the door frame. That's not what I meant. Yes, it was. Daniel's voice was eerily calm now. That's exactly what you meant. His finger hovered over the emergency call button. Daniel, please, Lisa whispered. I love you. Everything I did because I love you. Can't you see that? Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and realized he was staring at a complete stranger. The woman he'd thought he knew, the woman he'd planned to marry, had never existed. He pressed the button. Police and ambulance, he said when the operator answered. Someone just tried to kill my mother. Lisa's face went white. No, Daniel, don't do this. We can work this out. My address is 2847 East 3rd Avenue, Cherry Creek, Daniel continued, his eyes never leaving Lisa's face. The attacker is still here. Please hurry. Lisa looked at him for one long moment. Then she turned and ran. Daniel heard her footsteps pounding down the stairs, heard the front door slam, heard her car engine start. He didn't chase her. Didn't try to stop her. He just sat down on the bed next to his mother and wrapped his arms around her, feeling her shake against him, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. I've got you, Mom, he whispered. I've got you. You're safe now. And as he held her, as he waited for the police and ambulance to arrive, Daniel thought about that feeling in his chest earlier. That unexplainable pull that had sent him home early. 5 more minutes, and his mother would be dead. The ambulance arrived first, sirens wailing through the quiet Cherry Creek neighborhood. 2 paramedics rushed upstairs with their equipment, their faces professional but concerned. Grace was sitting on the edge of the bed, Daniel's arm around her shoulders. The marks on her neck had darkened to deep purple bruises, finger-shaped impressions that made Daniel's stomach turn every time he looked at them. Ma'am, can you tell me your name? One paramedic asked gently, shining a light in Grace's eyes. Grace, she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. Grace Blake. Mrs. Blake, I'm going to examine your throat. This might be uncomfortable. While they worked on his mother, Daniel stepped out into the hallway and called his lawyer, his hands still shaking. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 officers, a man and a woman, with notebooks and serious expressions. Daniel told them everything. The feeling that sent him home. The scream. What he saw when he opened the door. What Lisa said before she ran. The female officer wrote it all down, her face carefully neutral. And where is Miss? She checked her notes. Miss Lisa Henderson now? She ran, Daniel said. Got in her car and left maybe 20 minutes ago. Do you know where she might have gone? Daniel thought about it. Her apartment, maybe. In Capitol Hill. I can give you the address. The paramedics were bringing Grace downstairs now, insisting she needed to go to Denver Health Medical Center to be properly checked out. I'm going with her, Daniel said. We'll need a formal statement from both of you, the officer said. We can meet you at the hospital. At Denver Health Medical Center, they took Grace straight into an examination room. A doctor checked her thoroughly, taking pictures of the bruises, running tests, asking quiet questions about what happened. Daniel sat in the waiting area, his head in his hands, trying to make sense of how his life had become unrecognizable in the space of 2 hours. How had he missed it? How had he brought this woman into their lives? His phone buzzed. His assistant. Sir, is everything okay? You left so suddenly. Daniel stared at the message. In his old life, before this afternoon, that question would have made him panic. He would have worried about the deal he was missing, the meeting he'd abandoned, the money that might be slipping away. Now none of it mattered. Family emergency. Cancel everything for the rest of the week. He turned off his phone before she could respond. The doctor came out eventually, her expression kind but serious. Mr. Blake? Your mother is going to be okay. The bruising is significant, and her vocal cords are strained, but there's no permanent damage. We'd like to keep her overnight for observation, just to be safe. Daniel nodded, relief flooding through him. Can I see her? Of course. Grace was sitting up in the hospital bed, and 4 in her arm, looking small and tired in the hospital gown. But when she saw Daniel, she smiled. A real smile. Hey, sweetheart, she rasped. Daniel sat down beside her and took her hand, being careful of the 4. How are you feeling? Like I got into a fight with a python and lost. Her attempt at humor made him want to cry. Mom, I'm so sorry. Stop. Her voice was firm despite being barely a whisper. This is not your fault. I brought her into our home. I moved you in with her. Daniel Blake, look at me. He did. Her eyes were tired but steady. You loved with an open heart. That's who you've always been. What she did, that's on her. Not you. But you tried to tell me, Daniel said, his voice breaking. I saw it these past 2 weeks. You were uncomfortable around her. You kept making excuses to leave the house. And I ignored it. I thought you were just being overprotective. I didn't want to interfere. Grace's eyes filled with tears. You seemed so happy. And I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just being a difficult mother-in-law before I was even a mother-in-law. You weren't wrong. You were right. And I should have listened. Grace squeezed his hand. How did you know to come home? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. I was in a meeting and suddenly I felt this weight on my chest. This voice in my head telling me I needed to get home. I've never felt anything like it before. God, Grace said softly. What? That was God, son. Warning you. Protecting us both. Daniel had never been particularly religious, even though Grace had raised him in the church. But sitting there now, thinking about that inexplicable feeling, he couldn't argue with her. Maybe, he said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, just holding hands, grateful to be alive, grateful to be together. Then Grace asked the question Daniel had been dreading. How long had you known her? 8 months. And you were going to marry her in 2 months. Daniel closed his eyes. I know. It was too fast. Why the rush? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was lonely, Mom. I've spent 20 years building my business. Making money. Buying properties. And every night, I come home to an empty house. When I met Lisa, she made me feel like maybe I could have both. Success and someone to share it with. Oh, sweetheart. I thought she loved me, Daniel said, and the words hurt coming out. I really thought she did. I know you did. But it was all fake. All of it. The way we met, the things she said, the person she pretended to be. None of it was real. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that would stay with Daniel forever. Your feelings were real, though. Even if she was pretending, you weren't. You loved genuinely. That's nothing to be ashamed of. The police found Lisa 3 hours later at her apartment in Capitol Hill. She didn't resist arrest. Didn't run. Just sat on her couch and cried when they put the handcuffs on. Daniel heard about it from Detective Ibrahim, who came to the hospital that evening to take their statements. She's been charged with attempted murder, the detective said, sitting across from Daniel in the hospital cafeteria. And we found some interesting things in her apartment. Daniel looked up. What kind of things? Detective Ibrahim pulled out his notebook. Financial records. Collection notices. Eviction warnings going back almost a year. Daniel's stomach sank. What? Your fiancée is in serious debt, Mr. Blake. Credit cards maxed out to the tune of over $200,000. Her interior design business filed for bankruptcy 7 months ago. She was about to lose her apartment. The words felt unreal. But she always paid for things. Split bills with me. Insisted on being independent. Did she? The detective's voice was gentle but pointed. Or did she just say she would, then conveniently forget her wallet or claim her card wasn't working? Daniel thought back. All those dinners where Lisa's card mysteriously declined. All those times she'd say, I'll send you the money, and then never did. All those moments he'd brushed off because he didn't want to seem petty about money. We also found evidence that she researched you extensively before you met, the detective continued. Browser history, saved articles, social media searches going back almost a year. The real estate conference where you two met? She knew you'd be there. We found the attendee list printed out in her apartment with your name circled. Daniel felt sick. So she targeted me. It appears so. Because of my money. That would be our assessment, yes. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at nothing. How did I not see it? Because she was good at what she did, Detective Ibrahim said. These kinds of people, they study their targets. They learn what you need, what you're missing in your life, and they become that person. You said you were lonely. She became the cure for your loneliness. And my mother saw through her. Mothers usually do. The detective smiled slightly. Mrs. Blake mentioned that she'd been uncomfortable around Miss Okonkwo from the beginning. Said something about her just felt off. She tried to tell me. Gently. Without wanting to interfere. And I ignored her. You loved with trust, the detective said. That's not a flaw, Mr. Blake. That's what normal people do. What happened today isn't your fault. But it felt like his fault. It felt like every bad decision he'd made had led to this moment, to his mother with bruises on her throat, to the woman he'd planned to marry sitting in a jail cell for attempted murder. What happens now? Daniel asked. She'll be arraigned tomorrow. Given the evidence and your eyewitness testimony, I doubt she'll get bail. Then we wait for the trial. Daniel nodded numbly. Mr. Blake, the detective said quietly, you saved your mother's life today. If you'd stayed in that meeting, if you'd ignored that feeling. I know. Some people call that instinct. Some people call it luck. The detective stood up. Your mother calls it God. Whatever it was, be grateful for it. After the detective left, Daniel went back to Grace's room. She was sleeping now, the medication they'd given her for the pain finally taking effect. He sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her breathe. In and out. In and out. So simple. So precious. He thought about meeting Lisa that first time. It was at a real estate development conference in Aspen, 8 months ago. He'd been standing by the refreshment table, trying to decide if he had time for another coffee, when he heard her laugh. It had sounded so genuine, so real. She was talking to someone about sustainable building materials, and she'd thrown her head back and laughed like she'd forgotten anyone was watching. Daniel had walked over. You actually care about this stuff, he'd said. She'd turned, smiled, and said, why else would I be here? They'd talked for an hour. About architecture, about design, about making spaces that felt like home. She'd told him about her interior design business, about a project she'd done for a children's hospital that made her cry when she saw how happy the kids were. She'd seemed so passionate, so real. It had all been a lie. Every laugh, every smile, every intimate conversation. She'd been playing a role, and he'd been too lonely, too desperate for connection to see it. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through their text messages. Love yous and heart emojis and plans for their future. Plans that would never happen now. Mr. Blake, the detective said quietly, you saved your mother's life today. If you'd stayed in that meeting, if you'd ignored that feeling. I know. Some people call that instinct. Some people call it luck. The detective stood up. Your mother calls it God. Whatever it was, be grateful for it. After the detective left, Daniel went back to Grace's room. She was sleeping now, the medication they'd given her for the pain finally taking effect. He sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her breathe. In and out. In and out. So simple. So precious. He thought about meeting Lisa that first time. It was at a real estate development conference in Aspen, 8 months ago. He'd been standing by the refreshment table, trying to decide if he had time for another coffee, when he heard her laugh. It had sounded so genuine, so real. She was talking to someone about sustainable building materials, and she'd thrown her head back and laughed like she'd forgotten anyone was watching. Daniel had walked over. You actually care about this stuff, he'd said. She'd turned, smiled, and said, why else would I be here? They'd talked for an hour. About architecture, about design, about making spaces that felt like home. She'd told him about her interior design business, about a project she'd done for a children's hospital that made her cry when she saw how happy the kids were. She'd seemed so passionate, so real. It had all been a lie. Every laugh, every smile, every intimate conversation. She'd been playing a role, and he'd been too lonely, too desperate for connection to see it. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through their text messages. Love yous and heart emojis and plans for their future. Plans that would never happen now. Mom. He took her hands gently. I almost lost you. I'm not leaving you alone. Not now. Maybe not ever. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. The first few nights were hard. Grace would wake up gasping, her hands at her throat, nightmares replaying what had happened. Daniel would be there within seconds, turning on lights, making tea, sitting with her until dawn. During the day, they fell into a rhythm. Breakfast together overlooking the mountains. Walks through nearby Washington Park. Quiet afternoons where they just existed in the same space, reading or watching TV or talking about nothing important. Daniel's business partners kept calling. There were deals waiting, properties that needed decisions, investors who wanted meetings. Daniel told them all the same thing. Handle it. I trust you. I'll be back when I'm ready. For the first time in 20 years, work waited for him instead of the other way around. A week after Grace came home, the call came from Daniel's lawyer. Lisa had taken a plea deal. Attempted murder reduced to aggravated assault. 8 years in prison. She's pleading guilty? Daniel asked. Yes. Her lawyer convinced her that with your testimony and the physical evidence, she'd lose at trial. This way, she gets a reduced sentence. 8 years. She'll likely serve 6 with good behavior. Daniel set the phone down and stared at it. Grace was sitting on the couch, watching him. How do you feel? Empty, Daniel said honestly. I thought I'd feel angry or satisfied or something. But I just feel nothing. That's normal, Grace said softly. You're grieving someone who never existed. Over the following weeks, Daniel started putting the pieces together. Small things he'd missed. The way Lisa always had an excuse when he suggested meeting her friends. How she'd never taken him to visit her family. The way she'd pushed so hard for a quick wedding. She needed to lock it down before I figured it out, Daniel said one evening as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset. Probably, Grace agreed. I was so stupid. You were human. Grace reached over and squeezed his hand. You wanted love. That's not stupid. That's beautiful. I almost got you killed because of it. No. Grace's voice was firm. She almost killed me because she made a choice. An evil choice. But you? You saved my life. That voice that told you to come home. That instinct, you listened to it. You trusted it. And that's what matters. Daniel thought about that moment in his office. That crushing weight on his chest. That voice in his spirit screaming at him to go. Do you really think it was God? He asked quietly. I know it was, Grace said. I was praying, when she had her hands around my throat. I couldn't speak out loud, but in my head I was praying. Asking God to help me. To send someone. Her voice broke. And he sent you. Daniel felt tears slide down his face. I'm not a religious person, Mom. Religion isn't what saved me, son. Love is. Your love. God's love. The kind of love that hears prayers even when they're silent. They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. You know what I learned from all this? Daniel said after a while. What? That I've been measuring my life all wrong. I thought success was about money and properties and being somebody. But you. He turned to look at her. You worked 2 jobs to raise me. You went without so I could have. You loved me when I had nothing to offer. That's real wealth. That's real success. Grace smiled through tears. You've always been somebody to me, Daniel. From the day you were born. I know. And I forgot that. I forgot that the most important relationship in my life was right here the whole time. He thought about his business, his properties, his reputation in Denver's real estate circles. None of it mattered compared to this. Sitting with his mother. Knowing she was safe. Being present. I'm not going back, he said suddenly. What? Not like before. Not the 18-hour days and the constant deals and the empty house. I'm restructuring everything. Hiring people I trust to manage the day-to-day. I'm going to actually live my life instead of just building it. Daniel, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He squeezed her hand. Because I almost lost what actually matters. And I'm not making that mistake again. Over the next few months, Daniel did exactly what he said. He promoted his best people to leadership positions. He stepped back from daily operations. He bought a smaller apartment right next door to Grace's, so he could be close. His company thrived without him micromanaging. Turned out, when you hire good people and trust them, they rise to the occasion. And Daniel learned what it meant to be wealthy in the ways that actually count. Morning coffee with his mother. Evening walks on the beach. Conversations that lasted for hours about everything and nothing. Watching her smile without fear in her eyes. One evening, 6 months after that terrible day, they sat on the balcony watching another Colorado sunset paint the Rocky Mountains in shades of orange and purple. You saved my life, Grace said softly. You saved mine first, Daniel replied. Every day for 42 years. Grace smiled. That's what love does. It saves us over and over in ways we don't always see. I see it now, Daniel said. Finally, they sat together as the city lights began to flicker on below them, one by one, like promises being kept. And Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Maybe something he'd never felt before. Peace. Real, deep, unshakable peace. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. He'd been betrayed. His trust had been broken. He still had healing to do. But he wasn't alone. And he finally understood what mattered. Not the empire he'd built. Not the money in his bank account. Not the properties with his name on them. Just this. His mother's hand in his. Her breathing steady beside him. Her smile real and unafraid. This was everything. This was enough. This was love. If this story moved your heart, if it reminded you that real love doesn't wear a mask, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the biggest lesson you're taking from Daniel's story? Because maybe this video found you at exactly the moment you needed to hear it. Maybe there's someone in your life you need to check on. Maybe there's a voice you need to listen to. Real love doesn't need to perform. It doesn't need to prove itself. It just shows up, day after day, year after year. And sometimes God gives us that voice in our chest, that pull that makes no logical sense, that sends us exactly where we need to be at exactly the right time. Listen to it. Thank you for watching. Stay blessed. And remember, you're never alone in your journey.